Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Oscar prediction update for the month of November. So, first of all, this is post-election. I imagine most of you clicking on this video are probably not in the mood for political analysis, although if you go to my social media stuff, you can find all sorts of commentary on that. I'm not going to be talking about that too much today, although it is worth pointing out that the Oscars are an American institute, and generally, there's been a trend whenever anything big is happening in America, that does impact the kind of mood that voters are in when they're deciding on what the next best picture is. And I do think that's going to be a really interesting conversation to dive into as we get closer to the Oscars, because the mood of the country is in right now is kind of hard to pin down. But I don't want to get too much into that, obviously. I will say we're at the point now where a lot of big things are happening. We've had the Gotham nominations. We've had a few different stuff come in. I'm at the point where I'm getting screeners, so I'm starting to catch up on a lot of stuff. I've seen movies like Anora and Conclave. And I gotta be honest, I toyed with the idea of making a Conclave video as like a companion piece to the video where I talked about the book, because I was a little bit let down by that movie. But after a while, to sort of have my feelings sink in, I think that I don't really know if that would be something that anyone would want to see. And I feel like my initial reaction to Conclave was sort of just general disappointment that it didn't adapt the book in the specific way that I wanted. So I'm not too upset about that. Anora, on the other hand, I was actually very disappointed by, I'm sorry to say. I do really like Sean Baker's other work, but I walked out of that movie being like, really? That's the movie that everyone says is going to win Best Picture? And for the record, I had just finalized my Oscar predictions before I saw the movie. I saw the movie yesterday. And so I ultimately decided not to change anything in my predictions because it is pretty clear to me that my opinion is not the consensus. But unfortunately, I was let down by that film. Now, one movie I saw recently that did not let me down was The Substance. And this is actually one of the biggest changes that's come out of the past month, because last video, I actually went on a bit of a rant saying that The Substance was just a film Twitter thing and it wasn't actually going to manifest at the Oscars. And since that video, there has been so much passion for this film, and I've begun to see it rise in predictions from pundits that I admire. So I was really beginning to wonder if there was something about this movie that I just wasn't seeing. And then when I did see the movie, I fully admit I was wrong. Yeah, so you get that. In my defense, I think I was expecting something along the lines of Hereditary, where it was really psychologically disturbing and very, very difficult to watch. And The Substance is not that. Granted, if you're not used to body horror, then it is a lot, but I think the movie has such a great sense of humor and the production value is just so good that the movie is very watchable. And I thought it over in my head a little bit, and I decided, you know what, I think this can happen. I'm sorry I doubted the film so much for the past few months, but now that I've seen it, it's turned me into a believer. Okay, and with that said, let's get started properly now with Best Documentary Feature. Not a whole lot has changed, although I have moved Separated into the top 5. I get the sense that between Separated or Zurowski versus Texas, we're going to get one big anti-Trump documentary in the top 5. I think post-election, we've done documentary winners that are very anti-Putin the last 2 years, and I think now with recent news, it's going to hit a lot closer to home. So Separated or Zurowski versus Texas could be a big contender. I still have No Other Land winning for now. Now, one thing that did happen recently was they announced the winners for the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards. And that is an award that historically it's best not to win, because the movies that win the top prize of that award show tend to be snubbed when we get to the Oscars. It's this really awkward statistic where and the winner of this year, it was actually a tie. It was both Will and Harper and Superman, a Christopher Reeve story. Now, the Christopher Reeve documentary, I fully expected to never make a serious play for the Oscar because I know a lot of archival footage, it's populist, and like, oh, that's the sort of thing that they'll never go for. Will and Harper, on the other hand, I have at number 6, and I think it's such a good movie and such a vital, important watch, and I would love nothing more than for it to get on. However, knowing the history of the branch and the history of what happens to winners of the Critics' Choice Award, it's unlikely, but I'm going to keep an eye out on it because maybe this is the year that things change. And if it does get nominated, there is a chance it wins. Best International Feature, I don't have a whole lot to say about that. The top 5 is still the same, so yeah, I don't believe I have any major update here. Animated Feature, also no major update. The top 5 is identical, and unfortunately, there hasn't been a ton of movement in either of those two categories recently. Best Sound. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is how some categories this year seem very, very barren, and there's not a ton of contenders at all. And then other categories are like really overstuffed. And Best Sound is a category that's overstuffed. There's a lot of different ways this could go. We have big spectacle actiony movies like Dune, Gladiator, Blitz to an extent. We have 2 musicals in the race, Emilia Perez and Wicked. We have movies like The Substance and Conclave that are using sound in a very interesting way that they may or may not want to pick up on. A Complete Unknown is music-based. The Brutalist, I'm surprised a lot of people don't have it in, but I feel like that's a movie where it's just going to get nominated for everything across the board. You know, I feel really bad about Furiosa because when it came out, people were talking about how the crafts were really good and it was probably going to get in a few places, and now it's kind of fighting to stay relevant, and it's going to really, really have to try to get nominated in a single category, I feel like. Yeah, I don't entirely know. I still feel pretty confident that Dune is winning this, but Gladiator, that's a movie that we've gotten reviews in for now, and reviews seem pretty good, kind of along the lines of Top Gun Maverick, but maybe not as good. A lot of people are saying that while this is Ridley Scott's best film since The Martian, it's not as good as the original Gladiator. And while it's very impressive on a technical level, the screenplay does hold it back. So we'll have to wait and see how big of a contender it ends up being. I think it's definitely close to Best Picture, but I'm not confident that it's in just yet. Best Song. Here's what's funny about this category. So for the longest time, I had Diane Warren finally winning her Oscar for the documentary about herself, Relentless. And because I heard that was coming out early in the year, and I just put it there. And then as the year went on, I never heard anything about that movie. Even though Wikipedia still listed it as coming out in 2024, there were no rumblings about it whatsoever. And then when the Hollywood Media Music Awards announced their nominations, that particular documentary was nowhere to be found. So I'm assuming that it's going to be pushed to next year, which is unfortunate for Diane Warren. Now, she's still going to be nominated because, like, legally she has to be nominated every year, but she has The Journey, this 6888, the Netflix movie, so she's already reserved her seat to be back. Unfortunately, she's probably not going to win. Although, she does have the benefit of the top 2 contenders are both from the same movie, Mi Camino and El Mal, and I've heard conflicting reports on which of the 2 songs is better. So if there's a vote splitting, maybe that's how Diane Warren comes up from behind and takes the Oscar. But outside of that, you got the 2 Emilia Perez songs, you've got your Diane Warren song, and then I don't know. Like a Bird was suspiciously absent from the Hollywood Music and Media Awards, which they really do go out of their way to nominate everything, so it's very noticeable when something misses. However, I just feel like it's got to. I mean, it's a Best Picture contender that has a notable end credit song, and there's got to be, I know there's Emilia Perez in there, but they usually, Best Picture contenders are the first place they look for end credit songs that can be nominated. And Kiss the Sky, I actually agree with Oscar Expert here. I am not a big fan of that song, even though I do really like the movie. And so it's kind of funny that this song is sort of getting put in by default because we don't really know what else to put in. Beyond from Moana 2, Disney made the very, very bizarre choice to release the end credit pop version of the song before they released the actual version that's in the movie, which I mean, the song sounds better than Wish, not a very high bar, but it's kind of hard to get a read on it when we can only listen to the pop version. And so I imagine this movie's going to make a lot of money, and so maybe they're just going to push it really hard because it's the Disney song. Although, ironically, Alan Menken is doing a song for the Netflix movie Spellbound, which I don't think is going to be as good a movie as Moana 2, but the song might potentially be better, and I debated putting that on here, but ultimately I feel like that movie is just going to be a little bit too small. And I'm really, really rooting for Harper and Will Go West, but I worry it might be a bit too cutesy and context-specific for this branch. Original score. Okay. Let's talk about the Dune controversy. So it was initially reported by Variety that Dune Part 2 would not be eligible for the original score Oscar because it uses too much music from the original film. And then there was a big rush as everybody took it out of their predictions. And then it suddenly appeared back on the FYC chart and people put it back on. And then there was some confusion. And I think the official word as of now is the Warner Brothers is trying to make this score eligible and they're pleading their case to the Academy. But as of right now, we don't actually know where the Academy is going to land. And so because of that, I would sort of assume that Dune Part 2 is not going to be eligible. I think the Academy has been awfully stingy in the past about not allowing certain scores to be eligible, like There Will Be Blood or Arrival, because there's a little bit of pre-existing music in there. And so I don't think that they would allow Dune to be nominated, but I could be wrong. And obviously, if it's eligible, it's getting nominated, which is why I have it at 6 and not out of the race entirely. But as of right now, we don't really know. So outside of that, there's not a whole lot to say about this category. So I'm going to take a look now at visual effects. Because I'm getting screeners now, I did watch the screener for Twisters, and I thought that's a solid film with very noticeable effects, and it would make a lot of sense as the number 5 in this category. I believe previously I had Nosferatu, but I don't know if the effects are going to be the big showcase on that movie. I think it's more so production and costume design, which we'll see it in later. Now, some of you might scoff a little bit at me putting Wild Robot at 10. I don't actually think Wild Robot is going to be nominated, but I think it would make a lot of sense for that movie to make the shortlist because they have included movies like Soul and Spider-Verse in the top 10 in recent years. So I think with Here crashing and burning at the box office, I don't think that's a big contender. And looking at some of the other stuff like Deadpool or Alien Romulus, I don't really know what else to put there. And so, yeah, why not put Wild Robot there because it's probably going to get shortlisted. Actually, I just realized now, the time I do the next Oscar prediction video, we will have the shortlist for the category. So I guess you could say this is my last blind guess, although I am thinking I'm going to do a video about like what my predictions for the shortlists are right before those are announced. Best makeup and hairstyling. Okay, so this obviously is where the substance gets booted up. But again, before I saw it, I was worried that this could go the way of something like Pearl or X, that was the one with the big makeup, or the Suspiria. Horror movies with very, very impressive makeup, but it's very difficult getting the Academy to watch those movies. But the substance is getting seen. And I do agree that once you actually see the substance, the makeup work is very, very hard to deny. So I do have it getting in and winning for the time being. And then Dune, Wicked, Beetlejuice, Nosferatu, those all make a certain amount of sense to me. We have some very big makeup designs. Yeah, it's funny, we don't have like a biopic thing in here, which is maybe I should have something like that. I don't know, but this would certainly be a very cool lineup if this were to happen. Best costume design, anything notable here? Not too much, actually. I again, we're kind of missing the movie that you would normally expect to be a lone costume design contender with like the fancy period pieces and Tudor outfits. Maria is probably the closest thing to that, but that's actually contending for other awards. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to see something like Firebrand with big costumes showing up here. But maybe Beetlejuice could get some love. We'll see. Production design. Okay, again, kind of all over the place. I've moved Wicked back into number 1. Oh, I haven't talked about this yet. This is the perfect opportunity for me to talk about this. We have reviews for Wicked now. It's so funny because at the beginning of the year, I was so confident that Wicked was going to be a top Best Picture contender, not contending to win, but was going to get nominated and was going to get nominated across the board in Tex and for Ariana Grande and stuff like that. And I got a lot of backlash for it, but I held my ground for a really long time. And eventually, last month, I started to get cold feet. And I started to be like, what if the movie isn't good? And I sort of backed out on my predictions. And now we have reviews, and it turns out I had nothing to worry about, and I was right from the beginning. Wicked is going to be a top contender, and it is getting into picture, and production design, costume design, and all of those things. So I guess I shouldn't have doubted myself. Go me. Oh, I'm coming across as really unlikable. The Substance I have at number 7. Surprised that more people aren't looking at that as a contender. That could be a Parasite the Father-ish, contemporary but very smartly designed production design that gets on. Although the top 6 is very tight, and I feel really, really awkward about taking Blitz out, but Nosferatu, another one we have reviews for, and the production design of that just looks so impressive and so stylized. I feel like we gotta have one movie in this lineup that's not really in the Best Picture conversation, and Nosferatu would make sense to be that. Best Cinematography. Another really tight category. I think the top 5 all look strong. Starting to get a little bit concerned about Nickel Boys. I've moved that down a bit. Because, yes, it could win because what it's doing is very, very showy, but it also could be seen as off-putting to some people. I think The Brutalist and Dune Part 2 are going to be very universally loved. Nickel Boys, I'm not really sure. Conclave and Amelie Perez, I do think those should be safe bets to get on. And if you remember from last time, I had Amelie Perez in a lot of categories that I've now taken it out of, but this is the one category where I've put it in. It shouldn't be getting that crazy nomination tally that I initially had it in for, but it should be doing decently well for itself. And also, The Substance, which the cinematography looked great. My friend kept commenting on the cinematography when we saw it together. And The Girl with the Needle might be one to keep an eye on because that is a foreign language black and white movie. And we don't really have a ton of black and white representation in this lineup because Nosferatu, parts of it are in black and white, but not the whole thing. And so the Academy, we know that they love black and white in this branch. So definitely keep your eye on that one. And also Maria, although I am a little bit hesitant to actually predict Maria to get on because I just don't know how well that movie is going to do outside of Jolie. And this director's work, Jackie did okay, but Spencer did not very good. El Conde just got the one nomination. We'll have to wait and see. Best Film Editing. Solid top 5, Substance right outside it. September 5th, also a potential contender, although I don't know how well that movie's going to do, and I don't have a ton of faith in that one. You'll notice I have The Substance just outside the top 5 of a lot of tech categories, because I'm like, I don't exactly know how much they're going to go for it, and there's a world where it does really, really well on Oscar nomination day, and there's a world where it just gets a handful of things. There's a world where it just gets the Best Makeup nomination, although I don't think we're headed in that direction. And now we've arrived at the above-the-line categories, starting with Best Adapted Screenplay. So I have Conclave at number 1. Although I do want to point out, I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, Conclave's definitely going to win because it's got such good dialogue. And while I don't disagree, I do want to point out the fact that the vast majority of the dialogue in this movie is lifted directly out of the book. So I would raise the question of how much of a feat of adaptation is this screenplay, really? But I guess that's not what voters are looking for. And it's very dialogue heavy, so it's probably going to win. And this is one of those categories where, like, it's got a solid top 5, and then after that, I don't know what to do. Wild Robot is probably not number 6, but I don't really know what is. It would be really interesting if it was Wicked. I understand that stage adaptations of musicals don't tend to show up in screenplay, but I'm real curious how they managed to justify turning the first act of a stage musical into its own movie. Yeah, very, very curious to check out that movie. Probably won't see it when it comes out. I'll probably wait till December for my birthday movie. That's a whole thing. So anyway, that's adapted screenplay. If we look at original screenplay now, I've moved The Substance in. I've taken Saturday Night out. This is as good as time as any to mention. I saw Saturday Night right before I did last month's video. And then after I saw it, it lingered for the more I thought about the movie, the more I realized I don't really like it. And so, and I've heard a lot of other reports that it's just not catching on. So now I don't think it's in picture, and I certainly don't think it's in screenplay. The Substance. So here's what's interesting on this for The Substance. Pro, it's a very original screenplay, which is something they really look for: originality, new, fresh ideas. Con, it's a screenplay that doesn't utilize a lot of dialogue. There's long stretches of the film with no dialogue at all, and that might hurt its chances. But if the movie is really, really well liked, it could manage to get in. September 5th, I'm starting to hear that could be a lone screenplay nominee, and so I'm keeping my eye on that. And Hard Truths is one I'm also looking into. Outside of that, I think that's basically everything. Supporting actor. So, hilariously, I finally have a picture I can use for Guy Pearce in The Brutalist, and his face is blocked by the word monumental in the trailer. We didn't get that much imagery from the trailer, but I just used that picture because I thought it would be funny. Pierce, Macklin, Culkin, Denzel Washington, people have said is happening, and I'm going to trust them, even though I do question how much of a transformation it is. And Edward Norton, I have him in mostly because I'm not sure who else to put in. Yuri Borisov, having seen the movie, I would agree that he is the bigger standout than Mark Eidelstein. And I could see a world in which he got on if the movie is really a top Best Picture contender. But it is going to be a bit of a stretch because he is kind of an unknown. And outside of that, it does peter off a little bit, unfortunately. Now, the Best Supporting Actress, I would argue, is a bit of a stronger category. Felicity Jones gets the same treatment that Guy Pearce does, you'll notice. And Ariana Grande, oh, you doubted me for having her in. And granted, I kind of doubting myself because I took her out, but I put her back in because the reviews are like, this is definitely happening. This is a Ryan Gosling as Ken level comedic performance that can definitely show up. So very, very satisfied. I have taken Selena Gomez out of the running. There's only one pop star from my childhood that can show up here. I say from my childhood. Obviously, they're both pop stars now, but I knew them from Wizards of Waverly Place and Victorious. Yeah, so I knew them before they were in Oscar-nominated movies. Danielle Deadwyler, I'm seeing a little bit of hesitation on her because it really does seem like that movie is completely dead outside of her performance, but hopefully she can still get in. And Saoirse Ronan as Blitz rounds up the top 5. Now I am very, very curious about 6 through 10. This is not a category that I think peters out. I think there's room for Gomez if people really, really love the movie. I think there's room for Ingenue Ellis-Taylor if that movie is really strongly embraced, although I don't know how big of a role that is. Isabella Rossellini is interesting because it's true she gets barely anything to do in the movie, and yet she does somehow leave a strong impression. So I wouldn't entirely rule her out of the conversation to be the next Judi Dench in Belfast. And Margaret Qualley, if that movie is a real contender, could show up. Although, am I the only one who feels like putting Qualley in supporting is kind of category fraud? I feel like both Demi Moore and Qualley share the main character. And in the last act, Qualley does get a little bit more to do. For those who don't know, at the very, very end of the movie, it is Qualley under all that makeup and not Moore. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those two campaigns shake out next to each other. Best Actor. Cast your eyes upon the weakest Best Actor category you have ever seen. Wow. So about this lineup, I really had to struggle to fill out 6 through 10. The reason that I have Kieran Culkin at number 10 is I feel like it's not impossible that the Academy could just be like, screw it, and do a reverse Lakeith Stanfield and nominate him in lead because there's room. Like, it's so obvious that there's room for him. The top 4 slots we're assuming are locked up. We haven't even seen a complete unknown yet, and yet we're just assuming that Chalamet is going to be in there. And honestly, even if the movie is a disappointment, he's probably in because there's just not a lot of serious contenders. The last slot, I thought for a long time was going to be a tough battle between Daniel Craig in Queer and Sebastian Stan in The Apprentice. But now that the election has come and gone, Sebastian Stan is not getting nominated. Like, that movie is the last thing that anybody wants to watch right now. Mescal, maybe, but I just feel like that performance is not going to be the show-stopping element of the movie the same way that Crow's was. And I feel like he suffers from a lot of negative comparisons to Crow, and also from Denzel, who really outshines him in the film. Now, I have heard a couple of things about Kingsley Ben-Adir from Bob Marley One Love. Even though this was a little scene biopic from February of this year, apparently the studio is like, well, the category is so weak that if we launch a really strong campaign, we might be able to get that last slot. And they just might. Like, it's such a weak lineup that they actually could potentially stand a chance to get him nominated. Yeah. People have asked me to do Best Actor and Best Actress Hunger Games videos, and I'm actually working on the Best Actress one currently. I don't think I'm going to do a Best Actor lineup because coming up with 24 plausible names in this conversation just does not seem likely at all. But that does segue us perfectly into Best Actress, where we do have a number of plausible contenders. Now, I'm really unsure who's going to win this, because I feel like we're all kind of settling on Mikey Madison, but I'm sorry, I've seen the movie. Her performance was actually the aspect that disappointed me the most, and I think a lot of it does have a way to do with the character. A lot of it has to do with the way that the character was written, because I just wasn't getting a sense of that character's internal thought process. I wasn't understanding why she was doing the things that she was doing, and maybe that's just a me thing. But still, she is sort of our de facto number 1 contender for now, even though she's such an unknown actress. I mean, Carla Sofia Gascon is even more unknown, and I think there's enough transphobia in the Academy that would keep her from a win. Angelina Jolie, I know some people are really trying to make a win happen for her, but I just feel like the movie is not going to be that big of a deal, and because she already has an Oscar, it's going to be really tough for her to argue her way to a second one. Saoirse Ronan, I would love to believe it, but I'm starting to question if she can even get the nomination, because that movie came and went with zero fanfare earlier this fall. And Demi Moore, ironically, is the one who has the best narrative, but she has the genre bias working against her, as well as the fact that she shares the role with Margaret Qualley. So I don't know who's going to win, and that's leaving off contenders like Torres, Erivo, Jean-Baptiste, Kidman, Swinton. So many of these women are legitimately in the race, and I feel good about this top 5 for right now, but I get the sense that as we get closer and closer, this category could turn into a real bloodbath. Bloodbath, let's do the Hunger Games with them. And now we come to Best Director, which is the category that gave me the single biggest headache of this whole video. So I want to have Coralie Farge in the top 5 so bad. But there's a problem. I cannot in good conscience predict either Brady Corbet or Sean Baker to be left out. Audiard, I guess it's possible because some people who are fans of his older work feel like this is not as strong. But I just feel like the movie's going to be such a big contender and he's such a legend that I can't imagine he gets left off. And then both Ramel Ross and Coralie Farge kind of have the same narrative in the sense that it's difficult to picture the movie getting into picture without bringing the director with it because it's such a bold directorial vision. It's such a big swing that if you have the film in picture, why wouldn't you have it in director? And I seriously toyed with the possibility of taking Denis Villeneuve out of the top 5. Like, I actually took him out for a second and then saw how that looked, and it just didn't feel right. Yes, Dune Part 2 came out early in the year, and it is a blockbuster that's not in the top 10. It's not in the top 2 for picture, so it would be easy to leave him out, and yet it would feel wrong because he got snubbed the first time, and there was so much commotion about that snub, and the second one is somehow more of a visual spectacle, and they owe him. Like, they owe him this nomination. And now Farge is also amazing, but I don't know, like, can they both get on? Is someone else going to get left off? Like, I feel so confident in this top 6. I actually would be really surprised by someone who's not in this top 6 getting the nomination in the end. It's just so tight. And I don't like looking at this because I want Farge to get on. I guess the way that I justified it was Dune Part 2 is going to be in a lot of people's top 5 of the year, and Nickel Boys, I think, is higher up on the Best Picture ranking. The substance, for as much enthusiasm as I'm seeing about the film, we still don't know for a fact that that's getting into Best Picture. And I think if it does, it's in the 6 through 10 range. So I don't know if Farge is going to make the top 5, even though I really want her to. I mean, a gender thing aside, it is very impressive work, and it would be a very deserving nomination. But, okay, let's move on from that and talk about Best Picture. So, before we get to the Substances nomination, I want to address the whole win thing. After seeing Anora, I did walk away with a bit of a feeling of, really? That's the frontrunner? And it is, I mean, you have to admit, it's an unusual frontrunner for a movie this small and about a topic such as the sex worker industry. For that movie to be considered the unanimous frontrunner. I mean, this time last year, we were considering Oppenheimer to be the frontrunner, and people ended up being correct about that. But at least that movie makes sense as an Oscar movie on paper. And this, it feels like we've already formulated the little indie that could narrative. And we kind of tried to do that about Sing Sing earlier in the year, and then it didn't quite fall through. But now, post-election, I'm going to be really interested to know what is the general mood that voters are feeling as we get closer and closer to the Oscars. Because Anora and Brutalist are both about the American dream in different ways, so they could draw votes. But I'm actually looking into Conclave as a potential spoiler, because that movie obviously being about an election and having a lot of parallels, there could be voters that want to vote for it and feel compelled because it exposes how messy an election can be, and also the potential joy of when it all comes together well. That could win, but then Are we going to want to give it to something like Emilia Perez? Are we going to really champion trans rights in a time when those are potentially in danger? Are we going to want to give it to something feel good like Sing Sing or Wicked? Are we going to want to give it to something really bleak about a serious subject matter like Nickel Boys? Or is there just going to be so much female rage that we want to give it to The Substance? Like, there's so many different outcomes that I could see. And I don't know. I have Anora in at 1 because that's what I had last time. And the passion does seem to be there as of right now, not from me, but from a lot of people. And side note, I do really like how my top 5 in Best Picture is alphabetical A, B, C, D, E. I don't know if that's the way it's going to shake out in the end, but I find that really cute. And in terms of what's going to get nominated for Best Picture, I still feel as confident about the top 7 as I did last time. But Wicked now, I feel, is solidly in. I feel like that's going to be a big hit. It's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it. It's in. Unfortunately, Wicked and Wild Robot are both Universal. And so if Wicked is solidly in, I don't think Wild Robot is going to get the campaign it needs to get into Best Picture, which is unfortunate, but I just got to accept it and not try too hard to make it happen unless it gets a lot of love from the critics and industry awards. And A Real Pain seems like that solid, feel-good little movie that is going to get enough support in the end. And before I saw The Substance, I was like, could it be Blitz? Could it be Gladiator 2? Because Gladiator 2 is better reviewed, but also is kind of an action populist movie. And Blitz is a very awardsy movie on paper, but the passion just doesn't seem to be there. And now having seen The Substance, I'm like, I can see it. I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed to happen, but I just feel like this is going to be one of the most talked about movies of the year. And it is going to be difficult to get people of my parents' generation to see the movie. But I do think if you tell them that this is a Demi Moore comeback vehicle, and this is about Hollywood, and this is a very bold new filmmaker, there's enough there that you can convince people to press play on their screener. Now, some of them might turn it off prematurely, but if enough people stay through it, then it could get the support to make it into the top 10. And I can just... The funny thing is, I already have this like vision in my head of the opening of the Oscars ceremony and the host being in their dressing room doing like a parody of the mirror scene. Like that's how the Oscar opened. That's how the Oscars opened in my head. I think it's like so ripe for parody and it's so iconic already. I think that The Substance can go far, potentially even further than the number 10 slot, potentially further than the 4 nominations. Yeah, I only have it in for 4 right now because I don't have it in for director, but it could do better. It could do better. It is funny looking at the other contenders. It's really funny to me that A Complete Unknown continues to be exactly that. It is the one major contender that nobody has seen yet. And so we could still leave the door open for that to be this year's Bohemian Rhapsody or Elvis, but I just don't know. I just don't know. And maybe I'm Still Here or Seed of the Sacred Fig could be the international contender in addition to Emilia Perez. But I just don't know what the passion is going to be there. And as opposed to this time last month, I was really, really nervous about my top 10. But now I feel surprisingly calm about the top 10. And like, I think that this top 10 could realistically happen. So, thank you so much for watching. I think that's everything I have to say right now. Don't miss the Hunger Games video, which should be coming soon. And I will see you next time. Take care.